Trump's Hormuz move could bring a tsunami of crises to India. Understand the real meaning of Iran's blockade. It is around 11:30 at night. Screens are glowing across different time zones of the world. Somewhere, the dots on tanker tracking maps have frozen. Somewhere, oil traders' eyes are locked on the price of Brent. And somewhere in India, policymakers are stuck on just one question. If the Gulf truly begins to choke, will it only make petrol expensive? Or will it hit our kitchen, our farms, our factories, our hospitals, and our entire budget all at once? The frightening thing is that this time, the story is not just about war. It is about routes. And in the world economy, many times a route being blocked proves more dangerous than a bomb falling first. Because when a narrow sea gate shakes, its impact travels thousands of kilometers away and reaches the plates, travel costs, and EMIs of ordinary families. On the 13th of April 2026, Donald Trump announced a US naval blockade on Iran's ports and the coastal access linked to them. According to Reuters, AP, and other reports, this move came after failed talks, and its immediate effect was visible in the oil market. Brent crude briefly rose above $100 per barrel, then came a little lower because of some hopes, but the market got one clear message: that the risk is no longer just in the headlines, it has entered the supply chain. One important nuance is this too. According to available reporting, this blockade is not formally focused on every Gulf port, but on the maritime access linked to Iran. Yet risk perception spreads so fast that other shipping lanes too begin getting affected because of fear, insurance, and military escalation. This is where India's real concern begins. India's biggest crisis is not just Iranian oil. The real crisis is the wider Gulf system. According to Reuters reporting, the Strait of Hormuz is critical for India because nearly half of its crude oil and LPG imports are linked to this route. And the LPG story is even more sensitive. India imports nearly 60% of its LPG needs, and around 90% of that imported LPG has historically come from the Middle East. So even if the route technically remains open, if traffic slows down, insurers raise premiums, ships are rerouted, or military risk rises, the landed cost goes up. At first, the common man sees it only in cylinder prices, fuel bills, and freight, but in reality, it seeps all the way down through the entire economic chain. Many people will say that India has faced oil shocks before too, so why so much fear this time? The reason is that this time, the risk is not only of a price spike, but of duration and spread. Reuters reported that oil prices jumped close to $100 in recent days, and analysts are watching that if the blockade drags on or Iran responds militarily, the shipping risk could become even bigger. AP also wrote that normally around 20% of the world's oil shipments pass through Hormuz. This means that if the disruption lasts longer, the market does not just change the price of one commodity. It affects inflation expectations, currency pressure, bond yields, and business confidence all at once. A small shock can be absorbed through reserves and policy support, but a long shock changes the pace of the economy itself. So far, India has handled this broader West Asia shock better than many had expected. Reuters reports show that refiners are working on alternative sourcing, and state-run firms too are searching for new suppliers. Under this pressure, HPCL even issued a rare tender to bring LPG cargo from Russia, which shows that India is doing emergency-style diversification. Not just that, in recent months, India has been increasing its purchases of Russian crude again, because West Asia risk has once again pushed energy planners towards source diversification. This response is important, but it does not end the danger. It only shows that damage control is underway. The problem is that if uncertainty in the Gulf lasts long, the pain will not stop at the refinery gate. Airlines' fuel bills will rise, truck freight will go up, shipping will get costlier, delays at ports will increase, and then that same old invisible tax will start getting added to everything. When diesel and bunker fuel become expensive, the hidden cost of every product rises. From tomatoes to tiles, from parcels to paint. At first, families feel that their pockets are being hit only at the petrol pump, but after a few weeks, the same cut begins showing up in groceries, travel, online orders, school transport, and medicines too. That is why economists often call an energy shock the economy's master shock. It does not come alone, it pulls other prices up along with it. The first blow may be seen in consumer goods. Oil and gas are not just fuels, they are also raw materials. Plastic packaging, wrappers, bottles, containers, synthetic inputs. All these come out of the petrochemical chain. So the moment crude and feedstock get expensive, pressure starts building on FMCG companies' margins. Many times they do not immediately raise MRP, but reduce pack size, cut grammage, or reduce promotional offers. This is the silent inflation that the consumer recognizes late. Reports from Reuters and AP are pointing toward broader supply chain inflation, and this same pattern can repeat in India's consumer sector too, because expensive imported energy eventually enters both packaging and transport. For sectors like paints, chemicals, and plastics, this shock is even more direct. resin, solvents, petrochemical feedstocks. The cost of all these is linked to the crude-based system. The nervousness seen in Indian stocks linked to oil marketing also tells you the mood of the market. Economic Times reported on the 13th of April that the moment crude went above $100, the shares of HPCL, BPCL, and IOCL came under pressure. This means the market begins worrying all at once about margins, pricing freedom, and demand pressure. And when this pressure comes on listed companies, the same thing later affects capex, hiring, and expansion decisions too. In the world of industry, another big fear is fertilizer. This is not just an agricultural input, it is also a matter of political stability. Reuters reported on the 8th of April that India increased fertilizer subsidy by 11.6% to 415 billion rupees because global prices had risen due to the US-Iran war and inputs like DAP had become more expensive. The government is trying to keep the retail price stable, but the global pressure is real. FAO too has warned that if the Hormuz crisis drags on, fertilizer and energy supply disruptions could lead to a global agri-food catastrophe. In a country like India, this means directly more expensive sowing, uncertain input availability, pressure on the farmer, and then a few months later, food inflation. In other words, an oil shock does not take much time to reach the fields. And the moment agriculture enters this story, it no longer remains only a macroeconomic issue. It becomes a social issue. If the fertilizer bill rises or supply tightens, then either the farmer will absorb the cost, or change usage patterns, or crop choice will get affected. That means a chain reaction all the way to production, yield, and mandi prices. The urban consumer will see expensive vegetables, but the root of that will lie somewhere in Gulf shipping routes, gas prices, and subsidy bills. That is the trickiest part of an energy shock. The source is somewhere else, the effect somewhere else. And when the source is foreign and the effect falls on domestic politics, the balancing act becomes even more difficult for the government. The LPG story is even more at the household level. According to Reuters, India is facing a situation like the worst LPG supply crises in decades, and refiners are moving toward alternate suppliers like Russia, the US, Norway, and Canada to reduce Middle East dependence. Just think, a disturbance on one route does not mean only geopolitics, it means impact all the way down to the kitchen at home. Cylinder subsidy policy, distributor supply cycle, import cargo timing. All these suddenly start looking like issues of national security. For poor and lower middle class families, a rise in the fuel bill is not just an expense, it can become a question of household nutrition, cooking frequency, and monthly cash flow. The tension over gas is no less dangerous for industrial India either. Reuters reported that amid global LNG supply disruptions and the impact on Qatar facilities, companies like GAIL had to search for new cargoes, and some terminals were operating well below full capacity. If gas availability tightens, city gas, industrial fuel switching, power costs, and downstream manufacturing can all get affected. India's energy mix is not yet fully insulated. That is why even if the household feels the impact through LPG, industry may feel it through LNG and feedstock. That is exactly why the issue of one maritime choke point spreads from the boardroom to the burner. Now a less visible but very interesting danger: helium. This conflict has shaken the helium market too, because Qatar accounts for a major share of global helium supply. Reuters reported in March that after the Qatar LNG halt, helium prices soared and a shortage emerged. Reuters also wrote that helium tightness had begun affecting global tech supply chains. Helium is not a luxury gas. It plays a critical role in MRI machines, semiconductors, and high-tech manufacturing. That means the West Asia crisis is not just a story of pump prices. It can go all the way to hospital scans and electronic supply. When the impact of war begins showing more in MRI systems and chip lines than in balloons, then understand that the energy shock has entered the invisible economy too. At the macro level, its next impact comes through the current account, the rupee, and inflation. If the oil import bill rises, pressure on the CAD will rise. If the import bill rises, pressure on the rupee will come. If the rupee weakens, other imports will become expensive. If other imports become expensive, the second round effect of inflation will begin. World Bank President 𝐟𝐨𝐥𝐥𝐸 has also said that a prolonged Middle East war could pull down global growth by 0.3 to 1 percentage point, and inflation could rise more sharply in emerging markets. For an import-dependent economy like India, this warning is not a light one. Here, the growth story does not run separately from the energy invoice. This does not mean India is helpless. India has some strategic response tools: source diversification, subsidy calibration, currency management, diplomatic balancing, shipping coordination, and sector-specific support. But the challenge is that every tool has a cost. More subsidy increases the fiscal burden. More intervention puts pressure on reserves. More pass-through raises inflation. More price control hurts PSU margins. In other words, policymakers have no magic button in front of them. They can only distribute the damage. How much burden should be placed on which sector, at what time, and for how long? That is the difficult art that appears less in headlines, but real crisis management happens right there. There is another layer too: remittances. If Gulf economies slow down because of prolonged conflict, the risk to Indian workers, jobs, and remittance flows can rise. Even if the full data has not yet emerged, historical logic says that prolonged regional instability affects both labor markets and project cycles. For India, remittances are not just foreign exchange. They are the monthly lifeline of millions of families. That is why the effect of Gulf stress may be felt not only at policy tables in Delhi and Mumbai, but in homes across Kerala, Telangana, Uttar Pradesh, and Bihar too. This is the silent channel that people often forget while reading oil headlines. Now the real question. Can this truly become a crisis of everything? The answer is yes, if the duration becomes long. Because the chain goes somewhat like this. Expensive oil, expensive freight, expensive packaging, expensive fertilizer, expensive food, high inflation, tighter rates, slower growth, squeezed margins, cautious jobs, defensive households. This is the cascading impact about which the World Bank has warned. It begins in the sea, then the commodity market amplifies it in the middle, and in the end, the middle class budget feels it. That is why policy experts watch not just price, but duration and spillover channels. So the meaning of Iran's blockade is not only that America and Iran have clashed again. It means panic is running through the nerves of global trade. It means India needs not just cheap crude, but secure routes too. It means a fuel shock can now turn into a food shock, fertilizer shock, freight shock, packaging shock, hospital cost shock, and currency shock. And it also means that in the coming days, whether the headline is about a ceasefire or retaliation, the real story will be written in those ships, premiums, cargoes, and contracts on which our everyday lives quietly rest. Right now, walking on a city road, you may not notice anything different. But if this crisis lasts longer, then one day the very India that seems to be handling this shock with great intelligence may suddenly realize that inflation has not just risen, it has surrounded us from every side. If this video has taught you something new, or if you feel this information should reach more people, don't forget to like and share the video. Your small share can become valuable and useful information for someone else. If you have any questions related to this topic, or if you would like to share your opinion with us, be sure to write in the comment box. We read every question and suggestion from you, because your feedback inspires us to create better content. And if you want to keep receiving such interesting and reliable information about business, the economy, and the world in the future, then don't forget to subscribe to our channel GRT Business and also press the bell icon so that you get notifications of every new video directly. At GRT Business, we always strive to provide you with accurate, balanced, and reliable information. Our news and analysis are prepared based on information obtained from various news agencies, public sources, and public opinion. We make every effort to verify and validate each fact as much as possible. But in case of any possible error or dispute, the responsibility lies with the respective sources. Our only aim is to present you with a correct and trustworthy perspective so that you can understand any topic better.